All right, so welcome to another fantastic Fianna Rose event. Tonight we have a really interesting conversation on a topic that is, I can't think of, well, maybe one or two, but a topic that is very timely. We're gonna have an incredible conversation on microdosing GLP-1s, and who do we have here with us to have this conversation? Well, Dr. Tyna Moore and our dear friend, not doctor, but I call him doctor.
I am on the internet.
There you are.
Play one, just like everyone else.
I've seen his piece of paper. He told me he was a doctor. Jason Wachob from Mind Body Green. Tell me, what are we gonna talk about? But don't give away too much.
Show of hands, who takes Ozempic?
Oh, I busted myself. Darn. Keep that between us. Don't
Well,
let
if you take tirzepatide, then you can say you don't take Ozempic. That's what all the celebrities do. They just.
I don't think I take that. I think I take the stab myself once a week.
Yeah.
We'll get you a better one.
We'll talk about it. Yeah, well, we got better.
I'm here to learn. I'm here to learn. So tell us, what are we going to talk about?
Well, I think what's so fascinating is a decade ago you had the holistic folks and the Western folks. And they've come together in the form of you.
That's a good compliment. Thank you. Yeah, so we're going to talk about GLP-1s and all the different ways that they can be used, and beyond weight loss, beyond diabetes, and the multitudes of benefits that I've dug up and I've been talking about. And I think it's finally starting to catch on. So I'm excited.
I love it. You heard it. So as we like to say, strap in, get ready for another fantastic Fianna Rose conversation. Tonight it's going to be a really interesting conversation on GLP-1s, on longevity, on microdosing, and some applications for GLP-1s that you may not have thought of. A little bit about our moderator, who is also a Fianna Rose member. Jason Wachob is the founder and co-CEO of Mind Body Green, the leading independent media brand dedicated to wellness. He's also the host of the popular Mind Body Green podcast, as well as best-selling author of several books, including Wealth, and that's spelled W-E-L-L-T-H, How I Learned to Build a Life, Not a Resume. And he's also the co-author of The Joy of Well-Being, and that's W-E-L-L-being, which he wrote with his wife, who's also the co-founder and the co-CEO of Mind Body Green, Colleen. He has been featured in the New York Times, Entrepreneur, Forbes, Fast Company, Vogue, The Megyn Kelly Show, and countless other outlets. He has a BA in history from Columbia University, and he played 4 years of basketball, varsity basketball, if you couldn't tell. Ladies and gentlemen, it gives me great pleasure to welcome Jason Wachob.
Thank you. God, I'm embarrassed to say Columbia now. What a shit show. Thanks for having us. I think this is going to be such an exciting conversation. Having been in the health and wellness space for over a decade, I think we live in such a fascinating time. I think traditionally in our world, you had holistic medicine and you had more traditional Western medicine, if you will. And these were tribes and they were at odds. And I think that these tribes are coming together in the realization that lifestyle modification can only get you so far. And with pharmaceutical intervention, it can get you to a place of maximum health span. And the subject of GLP-1 has been the catalyst for this. And leading that change has been no other than Dr. Tyna Moore, who we are so excited to have her here. She is a naturopath by training and has really led the charge in this conversation. So let's give her a warm welcome.
Thank you.
So should we start by doing a show of hands? Who's taking GLP-1?
We can't see you guys.
So that's
It's okay.
It's okay. It's all good. It's a safe space. It's Miami, so it's everybody. So let's start with your personal journey, because you are not, if I were to go back a year from now and think who's going to be the person to really bridge this gap in our world, I would say nobody. But it's you.
Oh, it is. It was me. So I have a podcast called The Dr. Tina Show, and I'm getting some feedback. My podcast producer was just on me about doing an episode about Ozempic. And I don't like talking about weight loss. My platform has been all about strength training and muscle as medicine and lifestyle interventions for making yourself more resilient to anything that comes your way, right? Whether it be a virus or a chronic illness or anything. And so I said, look, I'm not going to talk about something I don't understand. So I started looking into the literature, and I realized quickly that it was a peptide, and I have 20 plus years in the regenerative medicine space. So I have been doing regenerative medicine in my clinic, predominantly for musculoskeletal conditions, and I was mentored up by a really great man named Dr. Rick Marinelli, who taught me a lot. And I know peptides, and I thought, well, shoot, this is a peptide. Like, what's the issue? Peptides are healing, they're regenerative, they're anti-inflammatory. This is not a drug. This has just been appropriated by the pharmaceutical industry because of the delivery system being an injection. And it just so happens that they stumbled upon its use for type 2 diabetes, and it happens to help people lose weight, but it does a whole arsenal of other things that I found in the literature. And I remember turning around to my husband, the first thing I looked up was brain. I always go brain, pain, top down, and I start looking at all the studies I can find on those subjects. And I looked at my husband, I'm like, this is not what they're telling us. And this was at the height of the clickbaity, headlines, and moms are dying of Ozempic, trying to get ready for their daughter's wedding, and you're all gonna die, and how dare people take it, and how dare people attempt to do anything that might be helpful for weight loss besides white knuckling it. And so I started talking about it on my podcast, and that was, like a year ago. And then so many wonderful people have invited me onto their podcast to talk about it, and it's kind of blown up. But GLP-1s do a whole arsenal of things inside the body that you may or may not be aware of that has nothing to do with weight loss and diabetes. And the mechanism of action is totally separate. And so the reason you probably, if you don't want to raise your hand, you probably know someone who has been on these and come to you and said, oh my God, it's transformed my life. Like, how many people know someone it's been life-changing? And it's not just the weight loss component. Like, their faces don't just get thinner, the inflammation comes off, the brains turn on, the depression lifts. They feel like moving again. They feel like actually going out and doing things. I talked to a gentleman tonight, and he said, all the noise is gone from the food noise, so I actually have time to have a hobby. These are working on different mechanisms in our body that I don't think they fully understand yet, but we're not getting told the whole story. And I pushed back pretty hard during 2020 and those years. And so, having people come at me, like, how did I end up here? It's like,
you're in Florida, it's okay.
I don't really, I'm pretty, I have a thick skin. Like, people, Karen's coming at me on Instagram about GLP-1 Ozempic is like not the biggest of my problems. So I was like, well, shit, I'll take the sword on this and go, because this is really important, and I think people should understand it better. And I think whether you like them or not, they are not going anywhere, and they're going to completely transform the face of medicine because they have so many different applications that they're being studied for. And I realized that, like, somebody had to say it. It might as well be me. I'm used to getting beat on and having the censorship industrial complex come down on me, so.
But it's not like you just threw your values out the door.
No.
And said, because you still believe you're a naturopath by trade, like lifestyle modification first. And that is a critical component. It's not just, here's the GLP-1.
Yeah, good luck. Yeah. Well, it's just part of a comprehensive treatment program, and it's the way I've always approached my patients. I've always approached my patients with a comprehensive treatment plan for metabolic health optimization. That's always first and foremost, and that's lifestyle, nutrition, diet, exercise, strength training, bioidentical hormone replacement. Like, I've been doing this, right now there's a big movement in the online space talking about HRT for women, and estrogen is actually not deadly, it's safe, and it's actually, you're kind of better off on it than not on it. And a lot of these influencers, like, all due respect, they're acting like they just invented menopause and just invented HRT. I was in my clinic 20 years ago prescribing HRT. Like, I never got scared off by the Women's Health Initiative because I knew the study was flawed because they were using progestins along with estrogen. That was the problem. Right. And I never stopped prescribing testosterone because I knew that study was flawed. So I didn't realize this until I started talking about it. Like, I've been writing prescriptions for estrogen and progesterone and testosterone for men and women for decades. And so this was just another tool in that tool belt, but you can't throw the rest out.
But can you spend a moment too, because I think one of the reasons why I think they've gotten, I think, the attention it deserves, they being GLP-1s in our space, is because the benefits go beyond weight loss. There are longevity benefits, and I've talked to we know a lot of the same people who are prescribing it to people who don't need to lose weight. And this is longevity. There are lots of benefits that you want.
Right. Well, so it was originally researched for neuroregenerative properties. And that's what got me interested. And I thought, well, and I was also admittedly sitting in that spot of perimenopause where, like, I call it the thickening, where you're like in middle age and all of a sudden you have 15 pounds around your midsection that you don't know where it came from, and your brain fog is kicking in and you can't keep up with your daily tasks. And so many women in my practice and so many women online that talk to me, and my followers have shared this with me. It's like you're a boss babe and then you're just lost because your brain isn't working. And so that was what got me interested. And if you just go top down, it's made in the gut, but it's also made in the brain. So if something's made in the brain, it's probably important in the brain. And then if you continue on down, the cardiovascular benefits are profound. The impacts on your metabolic health, the way it heals your metabolic health. It's not just about appetite suppression and slowing gut motility. Like, that's a kindergarten version. It does so many cool things inside of your body. It spurs on metabolic pathways that rev and optimize your mitochondria. And you end up in a healing event with it. So the longer people are on it, I think dosed appropriately is really the key here. I think the fact that it's being used as monotherapy, meaning people, like you said, people are just being given the GLP-1, good luck, see you later. There's no lifestyle discussion, there's no support. And it's really just being handed out like candy for weight loss, and these people are not being counseled on how to eat properly, how to protect their muscle mass, all of those. And then you kind of go further down and you're hearing about women becoming pregnant. How many people know someone who's gotten pregnant since being on a GLP-1 agonist when they were considered infertile prior? There's Ozempic babies, there's Mounjaro babies, because it heals your metabolism. And that's really at the root of so much infertility that we're dealing with as a species. We're dealing with a serious fertility crisis.
And I think that's an important point to this idea that lifestyle goes hand in hand, because I think, and rightfully so to some degree, the knock on traditional medicine is they're just quick to write the script because they don't have time, the system, insurance. It's like, okay, what's the problem? Here's the script, go. Versus our community, the pro typically is we'll spend a lot of time. We'll talk, we'll do the labs, we'll do this. Maybe we'll be slow to write the script. But I think our community is probably the community that's more equipped to create the success that people want with GLP-1, because lifestyle does need to go hand in hand. And I want to touch on, like, it's not just about weight, it's metabolic dysfunction.
Yes.
Because you can just lose weight and still be metabolically dysfunctional and still have a high likelihood of every disease you don't want.
Right, and you can be rail thin and have six-pack abs and be in the gym every day and still have metabolic dysfunction.
So let's talk about that. Like, what can you define for folks, like, what is metabolic dysfunction?
So your metabolic health is, in a nutshell, when you eat food, it should process in your body and go down different pathways and turn into fuel for your cells. And a lot of our cells are busted, and it's not just about what we're eating. It's not just move more and eat less. Like, I wish that were true, but if that were true, we wouldn't have an obesity crisis on our hands. And people aren't just lazy. My whole entire family's obese, and they're not just lazy. There's something going on there. That's a really complicated conversation, but I think at the end of the day, there's epigenetic factors, meaning your genes get flagged. And so if your mom was metabolically compromised and she was dealing with some obesity and some pre-diabetes, then the baby is basically swimming in insulin while it's growing. That child is now marked for obesity and diabetes at a rate that you wouldn't believe. I mean, these kids are coming out with the odds stacked against them. I don't know how old you are, I'm 50.
I turned 50 in 2 weeks.
All right, welcome.
So don't know what to do.
No, it's okay. I feel like a grown-up finally. We were the first generation to really get hit with a lot of nonsense in the food supply, really get hit with
margarine, amazing, microwave,
fake fats and fake sugars and
snack
all
wells.
Yes, and all of it. And so our children are actually, many women, my daughter's 24, and do any of you have a daughter that age. There's a lot of PCOS happening. There's a lot of PCOS in young women happening, and it's pretty prevalent. And so that tells us that that entire generation really is looking at a lot of metabolic compromise just straight off the bat. They're like, the odds are stacked against them. I had PCOS and I was rail thin. They just didn't diagnose it back then.
Can you talk about PCOS for those not familiar?
They call it polycystic ovarian syndrome, but really at the root of the issue is a deep embedded metabolic compromise. And it's really prediabetes in a young woman. And sometimes they'll manifest with cysts on their ovaries, but really it's an infertility issue being driven by compromised metabolic health. They're not processing the foods they're eating properly, and their insulin is all over the place, and it then screws up their hormones.
Well, this is what's interesting too. You mentioned prediabetes, and I don't recall the exact numbers, but a significant portion of the population is pre-diabetic and has no idea.
They have no idea. It's a huge amount. I mean, I would gander, just based on my own, my patients. Back when I started in practice in 2008, my colleagues were like, Dr. Tina thinks everybody has metabolic dysfunction, because my mentor taught me to look for it. And I was like, well, everybody does. And now, in today's age, literally, like, what,
92% are like metabolically
more.
unhealthy, I think, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's only 6.3% are metabolically healthy, you guys.
Yeah.
6.3% of US adults are metabolically healthy. The rest are, and I think there are a large percentage of them are sitting in this room. You guys are, I'm from Portland. That's a whole different world of metabolic health. So we're really in a pickle. Like, we're really looking at a pickle of a situation. And it's not just about that, though. Like, the top-down effect of what's driving it, right? There's toxicity. There's a toxic burden that we have inherited, that we live in a toxic soup. And so we're born into it. We get loaded up on it. All the personal care products, the air, the water, all the microplastics. You've probably heard of all of this. I mean, it's like, I can't even drink a cup of tea because there's microplastics in it, right? So there's this toxic burden that contributes to poor metabolic health. There's severe lack of muscle mass. There's this striving of, I know, because I was Gen X, like, it was very in vogue to be heroin chic. We were all trying to be as skinny as possible, and like to the point where we looked like we were dying. And I was part of that. And I was in Portland in the grunge scene, and we were just like zombies, with flannels and combat boots on. So that's not aging well, right? That's not aging well. Like, being a thin white woman in particular is like, that's osteoporosis is skinny white girl disease. Osteoporosis is also basically diabetes of the bones. And so you've got that whole cohort, and then we've got this obesity crisis over here, and we're all just heading down. We look at the younger generation, it manifests, I mean, to be truthful, metabolic dysfunction manifests for the offspring often as autism. We're seeing a lot of autism rates rise. On the flip side, it manifests as dementia when you're old. So I'm sitting in the middle the past 10 years like, shit. Like, I'm watching it happen, really paying attention the last 10 years, the last 20 years being aware of it, but really seeing it like play out in real time the last 10 years. So we're in a pickle. And it's not just about eat less, move more. Your inflammation plays into it. And GLP-1s actually sit on multiple cells throughout your body. They sit on your immune system. They down-regulate inflammation. They down-regulate autoimmune disease. And I won't ask in here how many people have an autoimmune condition, but I bet it's a lot still, and I bet you know someone who does if it's not you. So that's impactful. And then it has incredible cognition benefits, and it's neuroprotective. So there's the piece where I'm like, that might stave off some of the the dementia. And then it's cardioprotective. The studies on cardioprotection are really phenomenal. So I'm thinking, like, my husband's got high blood pressure, let's get him on that. There's reasons other than overweight and diabetes that these might be really, really helpful for people.
And something I want to spend a moment on is, you mentioned your Portland days and the disservice, I think, culturally we did to women, where it was, let's just go to a size 0 and eat less and exercise more. I think it's important not to conflate weight loss with health.
Oh, yeah.
And that's, I think, part of the conversation in terms of people, okay, if I'm going to take GLP-1, I will lose weight, but at the same time, just losing weight, and yes, there are benefits, it's not enough. And talk about, like, it's a good segue to the lifestyle modifications that need to go hand in hand, whether it's lifting, protein, and like talk about that shift.
Yes.
It's a bit of a mindset shift.
Well, when I was in my 30s, I was really thin. I suffered with anorexia pretty much my whole life. And I remember thinking in my 30s that I felt like if I were to fall down, I was going to shatter. I was so thin and underweight. And so I went to the gym and I was like, teach me how to deadlift and squat. I don't need to lose weight. I just need to get strong. And once I started getting strong, the benefits were profound on my cognition, on my mood, on my career, on my income, on how I walked through the world. And so I started studying the benefits of muscle. And I think Dr. Gabrielle Lyon has done an incredible job of bringing that forward. If you guys don't know who she is, her book, Forever Strong, will give you the quick download of why muscle is so important, especially as we age as women. But I started studying the benefits of muscle, and your muscle is an entirely separate organ system. It's not just a mover. And I'm a chiropractor as well, and so I know all about the biomechanics of muscle and musculoskeletal medicine, but muscle does so much more. It literally is like an anti-inflammatory suit on your body, and it is a suit of metabolic pathways that keep your mitochondria healthy and happy, and you can add mitochondria to your body because you can build muscle. There's no other organ system you can build. And we see, oh my gosh, there's a 40% muscle loss. Like everybody's freaking out about the GLP-1 and the muscle loss. That's a lean mass loss in those studies. Your muscle is but one part of your lean mass. Your lean mass is all the soft tissue on your body. And that's when they're cranking people at really high doses. So my argument from the beginning that we haven't talked about yet is I thought, well, what if I approach these peptides the way that I do hormone replacement therapy, which is a totally individualized approach, dosing to meet the person where they're at until we get symptom relief. And as I said, most of my practice was regenerative medicine, and so people came to me in pain. So I learned how to do hormone replacement therapy in that regard. Mm-hmm. So to me, pain relief was symptom relief. That was what we were going for. I wasn't really trying to keep 80-year-old women looking like they were 20. I was trying to get women out of pain and to help mitigate migraines and joint pain and all of the other things. And so I started approaching the GLP-1s that way, and I found that every single person needs a totally individualized dose. It's very contingent on who you are, your age, your gender, your weight, how much muscle you have, how metabolically optimized you are. That's where the microdosing comes in. Some people who are more metabolically compromised and have more weight to lose need a higher dose, probably more of a standard dose. But I started playing with it and using it for a myriad of different reasons that had nothing to do with weight loss, except one patient, my dad, and it's just been profound. And then there's a ton of people we know who won't say it out loud, but they've been in my DMs and they've been in my phone.
Oh, they're in your DMs.
They're like, how do I do it? How do I do it? So there's a ton of people who will never admit it that are using it at really, different varying doses for different reasons. Very few of them. I mean, we all want to get like that 15-pound middle-aged kind of puff that comes off, because that's insulin resistant. So like it's actually healthy to want to get rid of that, but they're using it for a variety of different reasons. A lot of them are using it for pain relief and inflammation, a lot of them. So it really goes far.
So the dose is critical. What is your advice for someone maybe listening, maybe in the crowd, I don't know, maybe not, who can't see you, but wants to have a conversation with their doctor? What are some of the questions they should ask maybe about their blood work or their goals so that they're on the same page and they get the appropriate dose? Yeah,
well, there's a lot of people now that I started this conversation claiming to be microdosing, and then when I ask them, they're like, oh yeah, I went to my doctor. I just had a friend here who's in Florida. You guys have a great longevity doctor scene here in Florida. I think there's a lot of opportunities here that you don't find in other states. So you've got doctors that are hip to it. But they're claiming to be microdosing, and then they just get started on the standard starting dose, and then they message me and they're dying because it's way too high and they're puking and they feel awful. That to me is an overdose. That's too high, right? Like if I put you on insulin and you were dying, we wouldn't blame the insulin, we would blame the dose, and we would blame the management of that. Insulin's a peptide, for instance. It's a signaling peptide hormone, just like GLP-1s are. So finding somebody who's willing to work with you, but then realizing that you may need a little more, you may need a lot less. I've got people calling me who are like, yeah, I started a microdose, I'm so sick, I haven't gotten out of bed in a week. And I was like, you literally need to try 1/10 of that dose because you're so tiny and you're so fit, you don't need that. And they're using it, like I said, for all different reasons. So finding, and sometimes it's not for everyone. Sometimes people can't tolerate it at all. It just depends on the individual. But finding someone who's willing to work with you, and just your doctor should be a partner in what you're doing. They shouldn't tell you what to do and you just do whatever they say blindly. It's a relationship, right? Like, we're just trying to nudge your health along to a point where you feel great. That's what we're going for. So find someone to work with. And I think in Florida, especially Miami, there's a ton of doctors here who are really hip to hormone replacement, who are hip to longevity. The regenerative medicine doctors seem to be really good with peptides. So finding someone who maybe just works with peptides in general and letting them know that you want to try, if they say, here's your dose, you might try it, but ask them, is this the standard starting dose? If they say yes, and you're a tiny little gal, then you might ask them, hey, I really want to try something lower. The pens, you guys have heard all about the pens. The pens are the brand name, but it comes compounded. And when it comes compounded, it's in a vial. So we can play with that dose. And I'm not telling you to not listen to your doctors. I would always say listen to your doctors. But if they give you a dose and you're like, well, I looked it up and this is the standard starting dose and that seems way too high for me, consider dialing that way back. And just see how you feel, because it's always okay to take too little of something and build up and titrate up to symptom relief. It's never fun to take too much of something. And with these GLP-1s, a little bit too much, like in my body, is a lot too much. So you have to be really careful, and also know that it's not going to change your body composition any. Going back to the muscle, I lost the 15 pounds. If I want my booty back and I want my waist snatched, that's the gym. That's not going to happen from the GLP-1. It just makes you a smaller version of what you were.
Lots of people here do that.
Yeah, good. I know. So really knowing that that's not negotiable. Like, it's not instead of, it's not a substitute, but it can be a really beautiful adjunctive.
So there are lots of options if you go to your doctor. Do you have a slight preferences for, maybe it's Ozempic or maybe it's not a Wegovy, like, of all the options out there?
It depends on the person. I've noticed that some people really love semaglutide. So semaglutide is brand name Ozempic and Wegovy, and then tirzepatide is brand name Mounjaro and Zepbound. And they're the same things. Ozempic is FDA approved for type 2 diabetes. Wegovy is FDA approved for weight loss. Same over here. Mounjaro, type 2 diabetes, Zepbound. And they just came out, Eli Lilly just came out with a Zepbound in a vial, which is very exciting. So you can actually start to play with your dose. The tirzepatide is a GIP agonist as well, meaning it works on a different mechanism in addition to having the GLP-1 properties. And I have found with people who might be having a little bit more insulin resistance as an issue, and I'm in that category, I find tirzepatide. And also I would say I'm noticing folks who have a little bit more of a immune component. So any of you middle-aged ladies notice that you hit middle age and you start puffing up over everything? Like, you get off a plane and you're puffy, you have a little too much salt in your puffy, you're all very non-puffy women, but it happens. It happens to the best of us. Tirzepatide, that's a little bit of an insulin problem. Even though I was really thin, that's a little bit of an insulin problem, and I think that tirzepatide really shines there, but it can sneak up on you. Tirzepatide, if you hear nothing else, these sneak up on you, and tirzepatide really can sneak up on you. As your tissues get titrated up and saturated, all of a sudden, you're like, I'm good. Oh my gosh, I'm having terrible side effects. That's the sneaky part. Semaglutide seems a little bit more clean in that it's just a GLP-1 agonist. It's much less expensive in most cases, and it's great if cost is an issue. That's probably not a problem for any of you guys, but it really is more approachable for people in a lot of ways. And I know patients who are on it, they just love it. They're just great with it. It works well. And I'm talking, you've heard about the outlandish prices of these. Compounded, a vial of semaglutide, the way that if a microdose is appropriate for you, that might be like $30 a month. And you may be able to get rid of a lot of other pharmaceuticals that you're taking. And so I'm noticing with patients, some of them are able to get off antidepressants, blood pressure medications, like there's a whole litany of benefits, and it really is individualized to the person and how compliant they are, like how much they're doing all the things. But there's really options out there, and you kind of just have to see what works for you.
So in terms of compliance, what is paramount for someone who really wants to make sure this works? Is it resistance training? Is it protein? Is it is it individualized? How would you stack rank? Like, okay, if you're going to do this, you absolutely need to do X, Y, or Z to become successful.
I always say dose until you have appetite control. And I think all of us could maybe use a little bit of that, maybe without knowing. Especially as you hit middle age, your appetite will increase. The way that your body handles your peptides in your brain, like leptin and ghrelin, and appetite suppression, it shifts as your estrogen shifts. So I think that figuring out where the line is so you don't go into appetite suppression, because we don't want you under eating. That's not the goal here. We just want you having good control. And it also gives people control over drinking. It gives people control over smoking. It gives people control over gambling, doom scrolling on social media. I've had followers tell me they're not shopping all the time online. They're not shopping in general. I've had people message me and say that, like for myself, I don't overpack. I'm able to not, it's the weirdest thing. Like I used to always overpack, and now I'm like, oh, I just need my carry-on and I'm fine. So the onus of control comes back for the person, but we don't want to go so far that we're not eating enough protein. So making sure that that's the first food you put in your mouth, but that's how it should be anyway. Like you should eat your protein on your plate first, no matter what. I mean, that GLP or not, right? So I've always said that. So get enough protein in. That may be different for all of you. I know people want a standard of like, eat a gram of protein per pound of body weight, but that can be really hard. So just about 30 grams a meal, that's what we all know if we want to stay lean and healthy and trim. And that's like a chicken breast or a piece of meat. And then eat that first, because you only have so much room in that bag, which is your stomach, and we don't want to fill it up with carbs. You guys you don't look like a carb heavy crowd, so I don't think this is a problem for you. But just making sure you get enough protein in. You have to optimize your sleep. Sometimes these can actually cause sleep disruption, and a whole bunch of people say that they sleep much better. So I think it's really individualized again. Some people have reported that it increases their heart rate variability and lowers their heart rate, which is ideal.
Well, that's cardio protected. That's great for longevity.
But there's studies to show in others that it increases heart rate and it lowers heart rate variability. So again, it might not be for everyone, or that might be the dose, and it might be how you're handling it. So there's a lot of variables, and you have to strength train because you have to strength train anyway. Like that's not negotiable, GLP-1 or not, in my opinion. If you want to age well and not break a hip, you need to strength train.
So we're going to open it up to questions in a minute, but in closing, where do you think the future is here? Because it's pharmaceutical. It's obviously a massive success. They will continue. My view is to continue to iterate and improve. What's your take on where things are going here?
Well, I just read an article the other day. There's a whole bunch of them coming down the chute. Every pharmaceutical company wants to have a GLP-1 in their pocket. So there's pill forms, there's new versions coming out. So the tirzepatide is what's called a double agonist. There's a triple agonist being approved soon that does even more. Although I don't think all those are necessary if you're really metabolically optimized and you're really just looking for some of the other benefits. I don't think they're going away anytime soon. I think they're going to get more affordable. I think they're going to get approved for insurance coverage for a variety of reasons. They're being studied for Alzheimer's and Parkinson's right now, and the results are really compelling. Wow. I just think we're going to see, it's being studied for alcohol abuse syndrome, it's being studied for a lot of things. So I think we're going to see more and more applications, and we're going to see the price come down because that's capitalism and it's beautiful that way. And I think they're not going anywhere. So whether you're on them or you're interested or you know someone who is, I think we have to stop vilifying people for using them first and foremost, because it's nobody's business what anybody else does to their body at the end of the day. This peptide has been around in some version of a generation for 20 years, and yet it wasn't until the weight loss conversation showed up that everybody started losing their minds. So that's interesting. But at the end of the day, know how to support the people around you. Maybe your parent is, my dad was morbidly obese and literally spent the last 10 years in a lazy boy. He sleeps there. He spends his waking hours there. He's had several head injuries, traumatic brain aneurysms to the point, and that also potentiates the metabolic dysfunction. Any of you have contact sport history, head injuries, it will thrust you into metabolic dysfunction in many cases. And so he's been on a very slow and low dose. He is on a more standard dose. My dad is back. My daughter the other day said, Papa's back. He can actually talk to us. We haven't had a conversation with my dad where he was coherent and not coming in and out of some delirium for a decade, and he's back. And I have my dad back. He came to breakfast with us the other day. He hasn't come to breakfast in over a decade. He goes and I bought him a puppy, a Havanese, and he takes this puppy out every day for a walk. This man didn't leave his chair for a decade. So support the people in your lives who are on them, and just get them to the gym and make sure they're eating their protein and make sure they're not being overdosed.
Incredible. Thank you so much, Tina. I think we got some questions now.
Thanks. I can't see any of you beautiful people,
No,
but I
it's
saw
just
you
a-
before, and
So-
you're also beautiful.
I want to start that by saying, I think for me personally, the biggest takeaway was the fact that my wife may stop shopping online as much. To me, that was like,
It's that dopamine.
I'm running to the doctor to get her a script. But no, in all seriousness, and when I think we started this conversation asking how many of you are on a GLP-1, and I don't think I saw a single hand go up.
No.
Let me just say there's no shame in it, because we like to do what we call a little sizzle before, which you'll see on social media. And Tina said, how many of you are on, GLP-1? And I was like, me?
He inadvertently shot his hand
I was like, oh, I think I just outed myself. And yes, here I am. My name's Pablo Doritas. I've been on Ozempic now for a year, which is true. And I will say, for me, I think I've done it the right way. Talking about what you said, I started super, super slow. Really, I got nauseous once, but it took me about 6 months to get up to the maximum dose, which is, I think, 2 milligrams, right?
Yeah,
And
you may not have even needed to go there. Not to like boo what you're doing, but just to say that, like, if people go really slow, they don't often even need to go above the first or second tick of. I mean, really, like, people can stay super low and still have the same benefits.
For me, it's been fantastic. I've lost 20 pounds in the last
you.
year. And by the way, I still work out. When I'm in town and whatnot, I work out 5 times a week. And muscle mass, I think, you're 100% right. And we have brought in Dr. Gabrielle Lyons, and we've done a conversation with her on
That's right.
skeletal muscle and the importance of that. And like you said, regardless of whether you're on GLP-1s or not, if you're aging, skeletal muscle is incredibly important. But my point is, I think there's this, I think GLP-1s are going to get to the point where there's no shame in it, in the sense of, it's kind of like we all talk about, oh yeah, I'm on the keto diet, or I'm on this diet or that, and you're just going to say, well, I'm on GLP-1. It's just, there's no shame in it. And I think we should all kind of have that level of acceptance where we use it as not a crutch, but as a sort of something to better ourselves, using it responsibly, knowing that it's not a silver bullet, right?
Yeah.
I think that's the main thing. Is it's not a silver bullet. You still have to be responsible and do all the other stuff as far as health and wellness, and you still need to get your protein intake. You still need to work out and lift weights and all that. And I think all that's incredibly important. But anyways, my point is, don't be ashamed. You can raise your hand. There's no judging in the circle of confidence here.
Can I
All right?
add one thing
Sure.
to that, to build off of the point you're trying to make? I think a fundamental huge shift in our world is, whether it's GLP-1 or PCSK9 inhibitor or HRT or TRT, men or women, testosterone, hormone replacement therapy. For most people in the longevity space who are very passionate about this, want to maximize their health span, it's not an if, it's becoming a when.
Right.
And these are people who are doing all the things in terms of the lifestyle. There's I think you played a significant role here. Like, there's an acceptance, like, it's hard to argue against the benefits.
Well, there's a point where you're doing all the things and there's nowhere else to go.
Right.
And then your lab starts shifting, or something starts
Yes.
going, the wheels start falling off the car, and you're like, but wait, I'm on HRT, and wait, I'm doing all the things, and wait, my diet is like, I'm becoming orthorexic again, which is that orthorexia is real. It's where you become hyper aware of what you're putting in your mouth, and it can become a little pathologic. And I know people who, probably folks like in this room, who are high-level CEOs, high-level business, they're traveling a ton, and it just gives them the onus of control back. So they're not drinking as much, they're not making poor food choices, the travel's not beating them down because their mitochondria are being stoked by the GLP-1, and it's kind of keeping them at a level. It really allows you to stay on your A game.
Yes.
So let's take some questions. Hold on. Chris, here you go.
Thank you for joining us. Really enjoyed your remarks, found them quite enlightening. And on one hand, it almost seems too good to be true, the way you describe this class of drugs, and you clearly highlighted some of the immediate side effects people have, especially if the dosing's too high. But I'm curious to know, if we were sitting here, and other bit of context is, we haven't had a large portion of the population on these drugs for an extended time horizon, but if we're sitting here in the same room 20 years from now, would you expect there to be serious side effects that we're not anticipating for people who might stay on these drugs for 10, 15, 20 years?
That's a really fair question, and we've had exenatide that started getting prescribed, I think it was 2005, millions and millions of prescriptions for that, and that's an older generation. They get more elegant and more tolerable as time goes on, and they've done good longevity studies on these. So the long-term results of GLP-1s in the human body are known, and it's very safe, and it's very effective, and in fact, right now, just in the past few months, there's been studies coming out, and these were people who were diabetic, and this was comparing it to insulin. And if you guys know anything about insulin, insulin is pro-grow, meaning it'll grow, like if you have cancer, it can be pro-grow. But in the semaglutide group specifically, these folks had been on it for quite some time, and they had a significant reduction in all types of obesity-related cancers, significant reduction in colon cancer, which is really exciting because that's kind of hitting my age group pretty hard right now and even younger. And then I found some very interesting studies, and it finally just got written up. Again, there's more studies coming out about its protection against COVID. So that kind of, there's a lot of industries that have something to lose by these GLP-1s. And not to get off topic of your question, but I think that the data is convincing enough for me, and I think with anything there's a risk tolerance. And I'll add one more piece that I think you were asking me. You can eat through these. So my goal is always to keep people on the lowest dose possible, and that's only possible if they're doing all the things. If you want to kind of, forgive my French, if you kind of want to fuck around and find out and you can drink through them, you can eat through them. And so you might end up on a higher and higher dose. And I think it's the higher doses that are more concerning to me. Mm-hmm. So my goal is I use other peptides, I use hormone replacement. It's not just a one-shot wonder. And my goal is to keep the dose as low as possible. We might do that with cycling it. We might rotate to another GLP-1. But for me, the risk of, like in my family history, of autoimmune disease, my grandfather died a miserable death of MS. And I have psoriatic arthritis. So for me, it's a risk tolerance. And I think that's the case with any hormone or peptide. You have to take everything into consideration. But we don't even blink an eye when a person gets put on a statin for the rest of their life, or they get put on a blood pressure medication. So for me, it's like, okay, a tiny dose of tirzepatide versus, I was really starting to lose my good wits. I mean, my brain was not serving me as well as I needed it to be. So it comes down to risk tolerance. But a life of obesity, ever increasing cardiovascular disease, those are real concerns for some people. So I'm not worried about it in 20 years personally, but I think it's everybody's risk tolerance.
It's working.
Your mic's not, oh, there it is.
Okay, I can speak loudly. Thank you for coming. I really enjoyed your lecture. I had 3 questions, but you answered the first one because I'm a big proponent of peptides. I've been taking HRT, peptides, everything since I've been 39. So people often ask me, are you going to be on this for the rest of your life? So you answered that first one. Secondly, as I recall, the only studies, and I'm talking about real medical, scientific, double-blind, randomized studies that correlate longevity with anything is decreased caloric intake daily and longevity. Are there any new studies that correlate, real studies, not anecdotal evidence, are there any real studies that correlate this with longevity, actual living longer, not quality of life, but living longer, one?
Not that
and
I know
2,
of.
what do you say to patients that are cancer patients, oncologic patients, because everybody always gets scared, is the peptide going to activate a tumor in my body? Are there any studies, and what do you say to patients that may have a previous cancer, but then may have benefits from this, but they're scared because it may activate a tumor?
I don't think this is pro-grow. So I actually think it might have anti-cancer benefits. I had a melanoma scare last year, about 3 months after I went on tirzepatide, and I thought, oh no, I had the exact same moment you're talking, that was like, is this making things worse? And so I went furiously searching, and everything I found was like, no, stay on it. Like, this actually might protect things from progressing. So we don't have hard data on longevity. No, there's not long term. Not specifically causative. We have correlative data. And then I think as far as cancer goes, the studies coming out right now, they're not being publicized. They're being pretty hushed, and I think I know why. Because what happens when the cancer industrial complex is real, and we don't talk about that. So I'm excited about it, but I would encourage you to look into the studies too, because it sounds like you know how to read them, and I think you'll be excited too.
Just over here.
Hi, how are you?
Hi.
Great talk. Thank you so much. And I would agree with what you're saying as a physician. I think the studies coming out long term are going to show a net benefit for most patients rather than risk from the side effects. The side effect profile has really been pretty tolerable for patients. So my question is, I think for a lot of people, the medications are out of reach financially, and I'm hesitant to refer to compounding pharmacies because I don't know how to ensure that compounding pharmacies are providing the medication and are reliable. So how do you screen for a legitimate compounding pharmacy?
So I am not a compounding pharmacist, and I don't know all the ins and outs, but I'm friends with several of them. There's actually a pharmacy here near Orlando called New BioAge. I love those guys. Those guys are legit, and they will answer all your questions, especially if you're a doctor. They will get on and answer your questions. Really good guys. They're really into strength training and optimization, so they know. They run all kinds of fun tests on people. I've always used compounding pharmacies in my career, so I had no idea that it wasn't a thing. I do know that there has been a witch hunt on the GLP-1 agonists when it comes to compounding pharmacies. And I've never seen anything like it. It was like the second these came on the scene, everybody was vilifying the compounding pharmacies. I am not worried. They don't want to get in trouble. I look for pharmacies that are going to be quick and efficient and word of mouth to some degree. I know the compounding pharmacies I like to work with, but there's been all these smear articles on Medscape and all these different places that I've read, and you read the article and there's literally no problem with the compounding pharmacy. They make the headline sound like there is. They get to the end and it's like, basically, I don't think Novo Nordisk and Eli Lilly like them very much. It really feels like it's intentional by Big Pharma because it's taking money out of their pockets. And the compounding versions are really affordable for people. So I don't have a better answer because, again, I'm not a compounding pharmacist, but I see no problem with it. I don't think it's fake, rogue, black market, semaglutide. They don't want to get in trouble because it's very expensive to run a compounding pharmacy, for one, and they don't want the FDA up on their butt. So they're doing everything by the books. Every guy I know, woman who runs one, it's literally the most punk rock profession. And that's who I've been getting my medications from for my patients, because you can get individualized medications for people for decades. So I don't know if that makes you feel any better, but I'm happy to talk to you and tell you my favorite ones because they're good guys. They run a clean ship. They don't want to be in trouble.
I think we have an online question.
We do.
Ooh.
So the online audience asked, I have read that there is an increase in heart rate during cardio workouts, specifically running and cycling, even on the lowest prescribed dose, to a point where your endurance takes a hit. Do you find that concerning that the peptide can have such an effect on the heart?
It can actually stimulate and raise heart rate. Like I said earlier, it can elevate heart rate and lower heart rate variability in some. And then in others, it's the opposite. So I think it really depends on the person. And I think same with the nausea, it depends on the receptor bed. How many receptors do you have for these peptides and how does your body individually react to them? But yes, I could see that being a problem for people who really are pushing it with endurance if that's happening to them. So I think, again, you have to try it out and see how it goes for you.
Okay, just in the back here. Hold on.
Thank you very much. It's been very informative, and it's definitely a great point of view from what I've been researching and reading about. My question is, are there any contraindications? Because from this conversation, I think it's almost good for everybody. So can I give it to my 18-year-old, my 22-year-old, or what are the contraindications?
So the risk of pancreatitis is real, but I want to qualify that. People sitting in obesity and type 2 diabetes is who they're studying this on predominantly. That's who all these big studies have been in. Those folks are already sitting on the edge of pancreatitis. And the reason pancreatitis happens, the number one reason is because you throw a gallstone into your pancreas. And the number two reason is fatty pancreas. Fatty pancreas, fatty liver, those are metabolic compromised disease. So if you're metabolically compromised, you're looking at fat accumulation inside your organs anyway. So I think anybody with a prior history of gallbladder disease just needs to be really careful and work close. That doesn't mean you're not a candidate. It just means work very closely with your doctor. Make sure your digestion is supported. That's a big part of what I do with my patients is I make sure that their digestion is working before I start throwing anything that's going to mess up their gut. So we want to go slow and low with everyone, particularly those with any kind of GI issues. Anybody with a history of pancreatitis, I would be equally as cautious and careful. Again, I don't think throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think just find a good doctor you can work with tightly. The risk about thyroid cancer, I know everyone's worried about that. That is a black box warning on the medication, and was in rats. And if you look at the studies, it was in rats that were given massive doses of GLP-1s. These rats form a very rare, it's rare in humans, it's very common in rodents, and it's called medullary thyroid cancer. And what they didn't tell you is the control group also developed medullary thyroid cancer. Has anyone ever had a pet rat? I had pet rats. They're great animals. They were very cool back in the day. They're now a little too inbred, but I had a very cool rat named Elrod. He grew a big, massive, nodule with cancer on his neck, and we had to put him to sleep. So rats are prone to this, humans are not, but that said, if there's any history of thyroid cancer in your family, particularly medullary thyroid cancer, definitely talk to your doctor. That might be a contraindication. It does shift your GI microbiome to a more favorable, less pathologic microbiome, but if you have severe gut issues, it can be really uncomfortable for a minute, so that's why we want to go slow and low. I think a lot of the GI symptoms are not just from the peptide itself, but actually the shift in the microbiome, because as your pathologic bacteria die off, you get what's called a Herxheimer reaction. You get a die-off reaction, and it can be really uncomfortable as those bugs lyse and release their toxins. So another reason to go slow and low as your gut sort of resets. But it can be very uncomfortable with people with SIBO, small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. There can be reasons why people are like, this is not for me. But I think, again, that's a dosing and management issue, and you have to really hone the gut health before you start throwing things at it. What are some other big? Gastroparesis. So a lot of people who get gastroparesis, like the majority of people who are at risk for gastroparesis are type 2 diabetics, because when you are in that chronic blood sugar state, that hyperglycemia, it erodes your vagus nerve. So these folks are already sitting on the edge of gastroparesis, and they might just get misdiagnosed as having, dyspepsia, which is, reflux, or GERD. You may have heard that term. Those folks are actually sitting in sort of a gastroparesis zone, and then they get massively dosed. The traditional dosing on this is really high and fast, and so you get ramped up very quickly, which I think can be very uncomfortable for people, and they get thrown over the edge. You can get thrown over the edge again into that pancreatitis. So there's these conditions where the type 2 diabetic or the obese person is already at risk, and then they get thrust with it's just a too fast and hot dosing strategy. So those are the big ones. I don't know of any others that would concern me. I would handle it on an individual basis if it came up. I would just make sure that they were being monitored closely and that they were always comfortable.
Such a great question, though, and I wish we did that with every pharmaceutical.
Yeah, right?
And even some supplements.
Interesting the black box warning on rats, but we've got some other things out there that...
I get why people freak out. But like it is like we should do that for every pharmaceutical we go on. For supplements specifically, this is where dosages come in for certain very ultra-processed foods, like really get an understanding of what could go wrong. I think it's
hormones too. I don't know if any of you ladies in here have ever gone for hormone replacement therapy and you're just like, whoa, this is not for me. I feel terrible on this. That's a dosing issue. Like, it really could be done better and more elegantly and tailored to you individually and probably titrated up more slowly, and then it's tolerable, and then it's like life-changing, and you're like, oh, thank God, because like you will pry my hormones out of my cold, dead body. I'm not ever, that's why people are like, you have to be on it for life, and I'm like, okay, I'm already on thyroid and estrogen and progesterone and testosterone anyway, so that's okay.
Yeah, I feel great. Sign me up for life.
Also to note, I have noticed, and I've had patients report, and I have a pretty big following, and it's not huge, but like it's pretty sizable enough that I have hundreds of thousands of messages from people at this point. I should say thousands. I have hundreds of thousands of followers. The need for thyroid hormone tends to go down in people when they get their GLP-1 dose right, because it starts healing the thyroid. So they don't need as much thyroid hormone. They might not need as much of their other hormones. So it could actually start to offset costs really well, to go back to the question about cost, because now they're not having to take these super high doses of stuff because they're feeling so great and the systems are starting to heal. Mm-hmm. And that's just speculative, but I'm seeing that.
I think we have time for one or two more questions. Silas, go ahead.
Hi, this has been great. Thank you very much. I've had a lot of interest in this topic, so I've done some of my own homework. And one of the things that I heard that I thought was interesting in terms of a potential side effect, you spoke about how it can help with addiction and alcohol and smoking cessation. One of the things I heard was that it can actually have an impact on one's willpower and ability to have joy in their life. So is that something that is a concern, or
Yes.
I'm curious about that.
That's a really good question. It plays and it impacts your dopamine reward pathways, and I think you can overdo it. So I think, again, that's that fine line of finding that individualized, personalized dose for you, because my husband will even tell me, he's like, you gave me too much last time. It was sucking the joy out of my life. And we do it for him for various reasons that have nothing to do with weight loss. He's a little more manageable on it with the wine. But it's a fine line. So I think there are people being dosed into just oblivion, and that's a terrible place to be. There's women reporting online that they're losing their libido because they're taking too high of a dose. They're really going for skinny, and in the process, they're losing their desire to have sex. So I'm like, okay, this is where, but that would be the same thing with any hormone. How many of you men have had testosterone pellets inserted in you, and you're like, suddenly your wife's like, would you stop pawing at me? I mean, I've heard that from so many male patients. They're like, I got to get my wife in here because I don't know what you gave me, but she's not responding the way I need her to, like we sparked some stuff, right? So, we don't want to overdose somebody into like hyper libido. We want to just hit you, as with anything, where you are feeling your most uniquely you, and you're feeling strong, and you're like at your fighting weight, and you're in control of your decisions, versus like sending you over the edge into zombie land.
Well, I think with that said, I think none of you will turn into zombies. I can attest to that. I want to thank Dr. Tyna Moore. I want to thank Jason. And I want to thank you all for coming and participating in this really interesting conversation. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a great night.